I was always jealous because the older cast members would get a break when they didn't have a scene, and the kids would have to go to the schoolroom and sit in a little room and do work. So
She made millions laugh as the sharp-tongued Darlene Connor evolved into a voice of reason on Roseanne, and then stunned daytime television by inventing the talk. Audiences described her as quick-witted, unwaveringly clever, and always in command. But behind that calm, caustic delivery, there was someone carrying wars that the rest of the world was unaware of. Sara Gilbert's rise to fame was not a dream come true. It came as a responsibility. She wasn't simply expected to act as a child. She was also expected to succeed, to carry on a family name that was already etched into Hollywood history. She became the outsider that viewers liked, the actress who always appeared perfectly at ease, not fitting in. But, away from the cameras, Sara fought for balance, identity, and something even more elusive than applause: serenity. Her story is painful, not because of a lack of talent or achievement. She had lots of both. Even at her peak, she often felt invisible. Sara's journey has always been marked by a silent sorrow, from childhood comparisons to her famous brothers to years of concealing her true identity. This isn't your typical Hollywood story of stardom and scandal. This is Sara Gilbert's tragedy, a narrative of genius overshadowed by loneliness, of accomplishments undermined by pain, and of a woman who spent most of her life performing, not just on screen, but in her very being. Sara Gilbert did not fall into Hollywood. She was born into it. Her family tree was filled with television royalty. Her grandpa, Harry Crane, co-created The Honeymooners, which influenced the golden era of comedy. Her mother, Barbara Crane, was a well-known producer and talent manager who knew the intricacies of celebrity better than most. By the time Sara was old enough to hold a toy, her half-siblings, Melissa and Jonathan Gilbert, had already established themselves as adored Little House on the Prairie child stars. Fame was not an aim in their society, it was a family business. Gifts from studio executives, stacks of fan mail, and big names on rapid dial were everyday occurrences for the Gilbert family. However, for Sara, it did not feel natural. She wasn't as dazzled. Instead, she frequently felt like an observer, standing just outside the brightness and watching everyone else bask in the spotlight. Her first employment, at the age of 5, was in a Kool-Aid ad. That diminutive figure would set the tone for her childhood. While other youngsters were learning their ABCs and playing tag, Sara was stepping onto sets, memorizing lines, and pursuing a career she didn't fully intend. School just contributed to the solitude. She frequently acknowledged that she felt out of place in classrooms, unable to sit quietly as other youngsters could. Her mind ran wild, full of dramatic characters and stories far more interesting than what was written on the chalkboard. On the surface, it would have appeared ideal: an early start in a supportive Hollywood family, the opportunity to play in realms most children could only dream of. Sara, however, was carrying something heavier inside. She was surrounded by comparisons to her siblings and held up to expectations she had never asked for. Acting provided her with an escape, but not a source of solace. She didn't desire applause or acknowledgement. What she wished for was something much more difficult to find in the Gilbert household: a sense of community. Sara Gilbert's life changed dramatically at the age of 13. She got the role of Darlene Connor on Roseanne, which would solidify her place in television history. Millions of Americans turned in week after week to see Darlene unleash sharp one-liners and snarky barbs, the tomboy middle child who was always one step ahead of the adults. Sara appeared courageous, confident, and completely at ease in her role. But beneath that act was a teen battling to stay together. Most children deal with identity issues in privacy, but Sara had to do so under the spotlight of studio lights and primetime television. Every awkward period, every self-doubt, and every step of her adolescence played out in front of millions of people. She once revealed how difficult it was to go through adolescence in public, adding that whereas most kids could experiment with self-image in the privacy of their bedrooms, she had to grin for cameras while figuring herself out. Even though she tried to maintain some routine, the balance was unachievable. Sara endeavored to live two lives after enrolling at Yale University as a committed student and a working actor. Her weeks were a flurry of coast-to-coast travel. On Thursdays, she'd travel to Los Angeles to film Roseanne, then take the red flight back to New York to attend Yale classes. Sundays were spent on trains, her body exhausted and her psyche caught between two realms that never seemed like home. Friendships were transient, as students either admired her or ignored her completely, too renowned to fit in and too private to join. Even inside Roseanne, the lines blurred. Darlene's evolution from a caustic tomboy to a cynical, artsy girl reflected Sara's own developmental struggles. Darlene, on the other hand, was celebrated for her eccentricities and was raised by a loving family, whereas Sara frequently felt alienated. The accolades she received for her authenticity came with an unexpected twist. The same business that praised her genuineness also penalized her for thinking outside the box. Nonetheless, her determination was unsurpassed. She even authored an episode of Roseanne when she was only 17, which is a rare feat for someone her age. Awards and nominations followed, demonstrating her talent. But behind every praise was exhaustion and a deepening sense of disorientation. Who was she really? Sara, the young lady looking for her identity, or Darlene, the figure everyone else wanted her to be? That question would bother her for years, because the true cost of playing Darlene was more than just the long hours and frequent travel. It was a gradual disintegration of her own identity. While audiences admired Sara Gilbert as the sardonic Darlene, off-screen she was carrying a secret that became heavier with each passing year. On set, she had evident chemistry with her co-star Johnny Galecki, who played David. Their connection was scripted into the show, and for a time, life imitated art. The two dated in real life, and many felt their teenage romance was just as charming as it appeared on TV. However, Sara found the reality puzzling. She cared profoundly about Johnny, but the spark she hoped for never materialized. There were no butterflies, only a hollow aching and the unnerving understanding that she wasn't feeling what she was supposed to feel. In the early 1990s, young actors were unable to openly discuss such differences. Hollywood was strict, unforgiving, and frequently cruel to anyone who dared to move beyond its restricted confines. Sara kept quiet. She smiled during interviews, played her parts, and attempted to conceal the truth beneath layers of professionalism. She believed that if she showed her actual self, her career would be over before it ever began. Will casting directors stop calling? Would spectators simply perceive her through the perspective of her sexuality? Those questions tormented her, so she continued to perform, not only on screen, but also in her personal life. For years, she kept her silence. Even as her career progressed and she grew older, she maintained the image of someone who had everything under control. However, stillness takes its toll. It erodes confidence, establishes barriers, and causes an agony that no medal or acclaim can alleviate. Sara co-created and co-hosted The Talk in 2010, a midday show based on honesty, connection, and real talks. In 2013, during an emotional episode, she finally revealed what she had kept hidden for decades. She was gay. The confession was delicate, vulnerable, and profoundly brave. She acknowledged that she had known for years, but was frightened of what it would imply for her job and career. The answer was quick and very positive. Her co-hosts hugged her. Viewers admired her candor. However, as liberating as it was, it also exposed how profoundly she had been damaged by years of seclusion. Because when you've spent so long pretending to be someone else, even to yourself, stepping into the light doesn't remove the wounds. It only starts the healing process. Coming out allowed Sara Gilbert to live authentically, but it did not protect her from heartbreak. For nearly a decade, she lived with television producer Allison Adler. Together, they appeared to have achieved stability by raising 2 children and maintaining a private family life away from the chaos of Hollywood. From the outside, it appeared unshakable. But behind the doors, the fractures widened steadily. By 2011, the relationship had ended, and Sara, who was normally reserved, broke down emotionally on the talk. Without identifying names, she revealed through tears how hard it was to watch something you thought would last suddenly break apart. It was more than simply the death of a romance. It was the demise of a lie she had persuaded herself about what love was meant to be. Just 2 years later, Sara was swept up in a whirlwind romance with singer-songwriter Linda Perry, best known for her band 4 Non-Blondes and her work as a hit-making producer. Their love tale felt like something out of a movie. Perry made a huge musical proposal in a park, replete with a picnic, t-shirts spelling out, "Will you marry me?" and a marching band. Sara agreed, and in 2014, they married in Malibu. Friends regarded them as creatively intertwined, 2 artists who recognized each other's peculiarities and depth. For a while, it appeared like Sara had finally found her match. Even this story unraveled. By 2019, Sara had filed for legal separation, alleging irreconcilable differences. Perry later expressed appreciation for their divorce, describing it as just another chapter in life's unpredictable adventure. There was no public feud, no bitterness, just the peaceful conclusion to something that had seemed everlasting. However, it left Sara with yet another scar. Each time she exposed her heart, the consequences appeared to make her more withdrawn. Every love began with hope and ended with solitude. After so many heartbreaks, Sara began to withdraw from public discussions about her personal life. What had once made headlines, proposals, weddings, and separations, was now kept within her own walls. Perhaps she realized that when love becomes a story for the world to examine, the grief becomes too much to bear. Even as Sara Gilbert continued to shape television from the inside out, the stress of juggling stardom, motherhood, and emotional struggles began to take its toll. By 2019, she had made a stunning announcement. She was leaving The Talk, the show she had founded. There was no major controversy or explosive fight. Instead, Sara explained it quietly and honestly. Her life was out of balance. She was spending too little time with her children. She was not taking care of herself. And perhaps most tellingly, she acknowledged she was bored of having so much of her life on show. "I'm okay with letting that piece of it go," she informed the crowd, her voice quiet but firm. It wasn't defeat, but self-preservation. However, she had already been caught off guard by another storm. Roseanne was revived in 2018 after 2 decades, with Sara at the helm of reuniting the Connor family. The revival was a big hit, generating massive ratings and reigniting old excitement. For a brief time, Sara's endurance seemed to have come full circle, but suddenly a single tweet altered everything. Roseanne Barr, Sara's former mentor and lifelong partner, made a racist remark about former Obama staffer Valerie Jarrett. The outcry was fast and fierce. ABC canceled the show practically overnight, thereby ending what had been a spectacular return. Sara, who championed the revamp, was devastated. She issued a short statement criticizing Barr's words as abhorrent, expressing her disappointment. But Roseanne didn't accept responsibility. Instead, she lashed out at Sara, accusing her of betrayal and even blaming her for destroying my life. Sara had once looked up to her, and the remark struck hard. Despite doing what many people believed was the correct thing, she was labeled as the villain in Roseanne's collapse. Sara, true to her personality, refused to fight back. She did not publicly express her pain or swap insults. She remained silent, letting the storm pass. However, the event resulted in another wound. A connection she had cultivated, a project she had tried to rebuild, had crumbled beneath the weight of someone else's actions, and Sara was left to deal with the consequences. Sara's career appeared to be on track at this point, but her spirit was exhausted from having given so much. She had achieved success thanks to her fame. However, it had cost her peace, friendships, and years of her private life that she would never be able to restore. As the storms of celebrity and heartache subsided, Sara Gilbert began to gradually withdraw from the life she had previously lived so publicly. She didn't leave television entirely. She remained an executive producer on The Conners and was involved in creative projects. But her approach changed. The desire to be continually visible, to continue expressing oneself, appeared to vanish. Instead, she leaned into what she had always desired: privacy. Sara grew more cautious during her interviews. She rarely discussed previous relationships, avoided tabloid stories, and directed questioning back to her profession. Public sightings became infrequent. She had previously dissected every step of her personal life, her loves, breakups, and even her struggles. But now she had created barriers around what was most important. Her children became her primary concern, and she passionately guarded her family life. For someone who had been compared, critiqued, and scrutinized since childhood, this retreat was hardly the end. It was a boundary. Sara had finally decided which pieces of herself the world could see and which belonged just to her. Her story is not full of loud scandals or exploding drama, yet that is what makes it so compelling. Sara Gilbert's story demonstrates that tragedy does not necessarily look like a headline. Sometimes it appears to be years of concealed sorrow, quiet tiredness, and the courage required to ultimately protect oneself. Her quiet contains strength. Her retreat demonstrates resilience. Sara Gilbert's path is not your average Hollywood tragedy, complete with scandals and headlines. Instead, this is a calmer, more frightening story. One of the women who made the world laugh while secretly harboring pain. From the weight of childhood celebrity to the difficulty of concealing her true nature, from love gained and lost to friendships ruined, her life has been a perpetual balancing act between being seen and remaining concealed. What makes her story so heartbreaking is also what makes it very human. It serves as a reminder that even those who appear strong, witty, and successful can be quietly broken on the inside. Sara's strength has always been her resilience, her capacity to keep moving forward despite the high cost. But what are your thoughts? Which aspect of Sara Gilbert's story moved you the most? Her struggle with fame, her relationships, or her silence? Please share your opinions below, and don't forget to subscribe for more articles like this.